Hey everyone, my name is Elio Narciso. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Scalestack, and welcome again to the Revenue Engine Master podcast, where we usually go and dive deep into go-to-market sales ops, go-to-market ops, strategy, and anything that can help us build a better revenue engine. Today, I'm joined by Jared Barol, VP of Go-to-Market Strategy and Operations at Copy.ai. And I'm very glad that you're here, Jared, and welcome to the podcast. Do you want to maybe introduce briefly yourself in your words?
Yeah, so my name is Jared. Thank you very much for having me here, Elio, today. My background, I've had every job there is in sales. And I mean that in a very literal sense. I've sold door to door. I've owned a consulting and services company. Helped start a social media network back in the day when that was a cool thing to do. And I've actually started 6 different companies. I've had 2 exits, but sales has always been my core competency, I think, of everything I've done. Also, separate topic is I used to import wine from Italy. And I
Barolo,
included
I hope.
Churros also was a very big one. We did anything that you can get on Alitalia first class. I was importing. So it's a separate topic for later. So moved into SaaS, worked in large companies like Salesforce and pre-sales roles, and then in corporate strategy and go-to-market strategy roles, where I led a function for Salesforce Industries, and then private equity-backed firms going through turnarounds. Spent some time there and helping to fix broken processes and try and save businesses. And now all switching back to more of an entrepreneurial hyper growth era and seeing what comes next in the brave new world that is life after Chat GPT and all that stuff. So that's sort of where I'm at. And in terms of day 8, yeah, the metaphor I like to use here is, have you ever gone skydiving before?
No, I haven't. I don't think I plan to, but we'll see.
First off, it's phenomenal. Everyone should.
Okay.
The first handful of seconds after you jump out of a plane, especially your first few times, you are tumbling and you don't know what way is up. You don't know where you are, who you are, why you did this. And all
Yeah.
most people can manage is a single syllable expletive. And that's with, wind filling up your mouth as you're doing it. That's what my first week felt like, this job. More so than usual. And it's because of how fast this company is going.
Yeah.
And I have not experienced anything like this before.
Wow, that's super interesting. Obviously, Kobe, huge brand recognition, a fast scaling company. So congrats on the role, first of all.
Thank you very much.
I mean, looking at your profile and based on what you just said, you've done a lot of different things, like working across industries and company sizes, startups and large enterprises. What do you think? I mean, I've also done something similar. I worked at AWS in the past, and then I've done startups. What do you think is good about each? Like working at a large company and then working at a startup, growth focused type of company. What's best about each?
Yeah. So the best thing about a startup is you can do a lot of things at once and you can
Mhm.
learn and grow and deploy knowledge very quickly. The best thing about a big company is you can learn how to do things, whatever it is you do, correctly. Some advice I got very early on in my career. Well, that's not true. Not that about 7 years ago, I got this advice, and it was
Okay.
from an executive. So Salesforce, they have a separate team that recruits into the executive ranks, C level and C minus one. And so one of the recruiters there, and he also does talent management in that group, said that if he looks at all of the C levels at Salesforce and the
Mhm.
ones right beneath them, with the exception of those who were lifers at Salesforce, what he saw was kind of letter Z. That you go big company, small company, big company, small company, big company, small company,
Mhm.
and your every career move is a +1 capability set. So
Mhm.
let me play this out for you. You go and work for AWS. You learn how to do marketing operations or marketing leadership well. You then take that and you go to a more senior role at a smaller company to deploy what you learned at AWS and learn why it's wrong as well. Because everything you learn is wrong always. You just have to figure out why and how to deploy it, which is a whole other conversation about education. But to learn how to deploy it. and then you deploy it and you learn what's new and you learn how to, okay, so I did marketing operations and now I'm also, by the way, doing demand gen perhaps, or I'm doing lifecycle management. And I realized, holy cow, I really like that lifecycle work and like post customer stuff. And you go and work for a big company, at a lateral. So again, Zigzag, big company, you go up a level, but you move to a smaller company. Now you have a similar level, and you go back to a big company, and now you're doing maybe something deeper in the customer marketing space, for example. And then you do that for a little bit of time, you advance there, and then you go zigzag back over to the smaller company and take maybe a title bump and do that. And that's how good careers developed, is what the advice I got. And I've seen that play out for myself. I've seen that play out for many people I mentor and people I kind of follow careers of.
It's good. I find that also doing that, not only like, you become more complete as a professional, but also in big companies, I feel that like you learn the virtue of patience and spending time, like, listening and understanding how things work. Because like, when I joined AWS, a lot of things look like, oh, why is this like done like that? Like should be changed. But then there is so much complexity behind that if you don't actually spend the time understanding how things work, you're not going to succeed. And then in startups, you basically have to invent everything. So you have to go as fast as you can. And if you can combine those skills, so like be patient, analyzing, understanding, listening, asking the right questions, but also being able to run fast and build things and like, invent stuff, I think it's the best combination that you can acquire over the course of a career.
Totally. I think there's a lot to that about the word patience specifically. And this is something that I am candidly just learning. And so there's a whole lot of jokes about, I have a lot of friends who served in the military in various countries, various services and so on. And there's a common joke in a lot of countries about the difference between, the Navy, the Army and so on. Mm-hmm. In the US, there's a joke that talks about how there's a wall in front of where you're standing and you need to get to the other side. And so, they bring in someone from the Army, and the Army guy looks at it and starts measuring and builds a lot of ladders and scaffolding to then kind of go around and over the wall. And it may take 6 months to do it and go a little bit over budget, but he gets there. And then you have, the Marine who looks at it and just plows right into the wall over and over again, bloody nose, and finally breaks through, I guess. And then the guy from the Air Force walks over, looks at it, and opens the door and walks through. So that's the common joke. And I feel like I very much played that Marine role. The role is like, if there's a problem, I'm running through the problem. Throughout early parts of my career, mid-career, I was joking about the last couple of months, but really the last like 2 to 3 years, really been learning a lot about. There's something to say about measuring and then taking a broader look at the problem and seeing if maybe there's a door you can just walk through instead of bloodying your nose. And even if it takes a little bit of time. I had this mentor, a guy named Michael Arisman, who chief people officer at a lot of different companies. And he talks a lot about every decision sort of living on a ruler. It's a continuum of, it might be, if it's am I playing organizational politics, or am I saying, I don't need that, I'm just going to solve the problem? Well, the real answer is somewhere on that continuum, probably. And learning how to think of the world less as a coin flip, this or that, and instead think of it more as like every problem you solve being on that continuum. It's an interesting framing. I've been internalizing a lot over the past year.
Great. And so as you were preparing for like joining Copy.ai, I'm sure you spent like some time over the break, maybe thinking, like fresh start, like, like when you start like a new book or like a new, like, notebook, and everything is fresh and, the future is bright. How did you prepare for like, the first week, the first few days? Like, did you read any book? Did you spend time like reviewing stuff that you've done in the past? How did you prepare?
Yeah. So I was reminded of someone, Marilee Bear, Chief Revenue Officer at Gainsight. And she told me what it was like for her before she started. That she was, spending hours a day talking to Nick Mehta and the other staff at Gainsight
I know
before
that.
starting. Yeah. And so I actually did the same thing. I spent my week before joining, I don't know how many hours I spent on the phone with our CEO and CMO and just learning about the business, learning what the problem set, because you have this like freedom before you're actually in seat to not care about the details and just think high level about the problems to solve. And so I actually put together my more or less what's becoming my 90-day plan before starting the job. To your question about reading and what am I doing? So I actually dusted off my copy of the Chief Customer Officer Playbook by Rod Cherkas.
Nice.
Great book, because I run my purview is sales, marketing, CS. And so just thinking about capacity planning or what has to be built right. I have my copy of my revenue architecture tome by Yako, Winning by Design, sitting on my desk, and I flip through this several times a day. And my fundamentals of managing treasury also I pull out now once I pulled up and kind of dust it off, because we're building an organization from zero and thinking about budgeting at that stage and thinking about managing cash flow. It's a different skill set than working from a scale organization where you have a budget to bend, and you need to rethink like, why do we have this budget? What are we doing about this? So those are 3 books I picked up over the past couple of weeks before rejoining here.
Very good. And what's the artifact? Do you like to write like a long form document, or like you take notes by hand, or like, a slide or spreadsheets?
Yeah.
What is your...
I used to be a slide guy on everything. Like everything I did in the slides. I'm trying to break that habit. I find it to be very limiting. And instead, I'm switching to a memo format. It's something I've been trying to do in the last year, and I think I'm doing better now. I like notes and note takers. I have, my iPad pencil always with my iPad over here. I have my, I use a screen cover for it that makes it feel like a paper.
Oh wow, cool.
It's really satisfying to write on it. It feels super tactile. It's great. So that's, you'll see me, if you see me, we don't have an office at Copy. But when I was in office, my previous roles, I'd always have my iPad with the pencil with me, and then everything gets jotted down. So it's a slightly different world here I'm getting used to. But
Very good. So fresh start, amazing. There are 2 things that, I'm preparing for this, you and I discussed. They are related. One is like, what's the future of RevOps, go-to-market ops? I mean, things are moving very fast. There is innovation, like, coming from everywhere. And then like, a changing landscape with AI becoming like so pervasive everywhere. And like, new industries getting created really, and old industries getting challenged. So one is like, what is the future of go-to-market ops that we discussed? And then the other is like, we both share the fact that in many ways, technology has failed us in this space. Yeah. And so maybe we can start from that. And like, you and I are both in tech and it seems that like the place where we are today is a place that like, where we have accepted probably for a couple of decades that like things are like the way they are, and like, improving them is very hard, and, it takes a lot of effort. And so then we just do things the way they are done. And I feel that the world is changing around that because of AI. But in many ways, if we look back, even like, over the last, 5 to 10 years, in many ways, technology has failed us in the go-to-market space, in the go-to-market ops. So everything that we need to use in order to make the revenue engine work efficiently. What is your perspective on that? Meaning like, you have a certain point of view that I'd love for you to share, but in general, do you agree like the technology has failed us? You've worked at Salesforce, which invented SaaS in many ways, invented like a platform where we, relate with customers and like manage the pipeline and do a million of other things. So what is your perspective? Do you share? Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? on that
Yeah.
statement?
So I have a couple of very strong opinions about this, and also be honest that I have a few opinions that are changing right now. And I would say, so where do I start? One, working on budgets and planning at Copy, for example, thinking about next year and growth. And, I started putting in some baseline assumptions that I have around span of control, for example. How many AEs per manager, how many SDRs per manager, and things like that. And I'm writing this down, and I caught myself and thought, why? Why are we doing this again? Like, it's the same numbers at this company that operates wildly different from most companies in the market.
Mm.
And copy, not copy, it'd be the same question I should be asking at any company today. We are able to accomplish so much more because of technology, but we don't take advantage of that in the right ways, I think. And for the reason that you said, I think real go-to-market technology has failed us, and we're not executing on that well. And so when I think about like what that means, I think of why we have a lot of these roles to begin with. So one thing I read recently was, and I'm trying to remember where I read this, had to do with the reason a lot of these roles exist. Why does a go-to-market operations role exist in a business? And where did this come from? Well, go-to-market ops, if you were to ask me, and he'll only have different opinions, I believe this is mostly true, it came from a sales ops role originally. And the sales ops role existed initially in the revenue function because it had to manage a revenue tech stack. There was business operations before that, which then started being fragmented out into different functions: product ops, sales ops, marketing ops, and so on. And that had to do with the technologies they were responsible for owning and administrating. And so what we just did is we created massive go-to-market bloat because of technologies that we had that were one-trick ponies and had to be managed by the business within that space. And like at Salesforce, this was we viewed this as an advantage. We could sell to the business, not to IT. We could bypass these large procurement cycles by getting the GM of some business unit saying, nope, I need that for my revenue. It's going to happen, period. And we totally bypass the CIO decision in many ways, depending on company size. And so that was why we were successful. But that's not a good thing, I think, in reality. Like, it doesn't help us as a type of employee in a type of industry. That hurts us. It makes us less efficient and more costly. It makes businesses less efficient and more costly. Not to draw the parallel, but like the R1 stuff coming out of DeepSeek compared to OpenAI, if you look at cost structure and investment, like I'm hardly an expert in the space, but even I think that's kind of insane, the difference in cost between these two different models that are objectively, by a lot of benchmarks, very similar from an output perspective. And you can point to cost of labor, you can point at regulation, but it's becoming more and more clear, I think, in 2025, that the bloat that we force on ourselves is making us slower and less effective and less efficient. And so I'm challenging myself to break most of the stereotypes I have about go-to-market organization structure and rethink it from the ground up. Another example of this, mid last year, I read the biography of Musk, the Walter Isaacson book.
I haven't read that yet. I should.
Isaacson, he's phenomenal, the writer.
I read Steve Jobs.
Yeah,
Steve Jobs was great. Yes,
absolutely phenomenal. And he did a great treatment of this as well. And he doesn't deify anybody. It's what does the life look like and how did it manifest in the person that exists today? Good, bad, you make your own judgment. And one thing I kind of took with me from that book is the idea that processes were created over time for good or bad reasons, but that doesn't mean they're the right processes today. And so if you can't put a name to a process, if a person who made it and why probably shouldn't exist. And I am taking that approach rigorously right now with Copy as we're starting to build out our go-to-market motions. For example, traditionally around this stage of company, you start tightening up who can own and access things in Salesforce.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that right now. I don't. So by doing that, I'm going to take away power from our SDR leader to do what he needs to do, or from our lifecycle marketer to do what she needs to do, and so on. Why? Why shouldn't they be? They're adults. They should be allowed to do their job. We should set boundaries around maybe some record elimination and record edits, things that are legal that we have to deal with. Financial records. If we already sold the deal, we already have the contract, probably shouldn't change that. Okay, fine. We need to have bill to ship to. Okay, fine. But outside of that, well, why? Why do we need excess process and red tape? Hire great people and let them do their job.
I think, and this is really important, and I think what I think about this is two things. One is bloat that you mentioned. There are like way too many point solutions, and that they've been like, stratifying themselves in the tech stack. The other is possibly like we have been accepting a mediocre level in many of these products. Like if you look at like Instagram,
yes,
TikTok, DoorDash, these are like consumer apps that are like just great, and they keep getting better and better. They need no like activation of the user, no like guide, no like enablement. You download them and start using them because they're like so simple. They're not like uncomplex. They are complex to use, but like, you immediately get how to use those apps. And instead, in business, we have come to expect like, mediocre products. And so it's two things, I think. The expectation level is like pretty low, and we have accepted that, like, I don't know, like the CRM is full of bad data. And on the other hand, like, we've been used to say, like, to think that like we have to have bloat, have a lot of tools, point solutions in order to make it all work. And
it reminds me of. Sorry, you go.
No, and so like I'm curious about like, which one do you think is more prevalent? Is like, our expectations are low, and so like, we have tolerated like mediocre products, or is more like, the technology that has developed stuff that is like, very point solution and like, solving like small feature sets, but not like, planning for like an overarching platform.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I'm looking for behind me is a book. I have all the Benioff books that he wrote. I think he's a great writer, frankly. I really enjoy. I get a kick out of them. They're fun to read. But I think it was the one Behind the Cloud, and talks a lot about like the idea of how Salesforce began. Do you know the story?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay. I'll do this for the
tell us again. Yes, you worked there, so yes.
Yeah, he was on sabbatical in Hawaii swimming, and he was thinking about his work at Oracle at the time, and one thing that was bugging him was how hard it was to buy from Oracle. And he was thinking, why can't Amazon.com was just really started taking off at the time, and he wanted to create a business where it was easy to buy enterprise software as it is to buy a book on Amazon. That is a good book, by the way. So that's what you're saying right now. I'm going to paraphrase it. It's we were at once 20 some years ago, almost 30 years ago, at a point where we were thinking really about how can we simplify software, the experience of buying it, the experience of using it, and we totally strayed from those fundamentals to a point where we need full-time people. Like Salesforce is very proud of how many jobs they've created in the ecosystem around Trailblazers, right? But what that actually means is we have had to create how many million jobs to be able to actually manage their software.
Yeah.
I was talking recently with a former EVP at Salesforce who's now starting another company around it's a simpler CRM, we'll put it that way, a more intuitive CRM built for the post AI world. And I love the ideas that this guy has because it's so much more aligned with how we want to work. People live in Instagram, they live in TikTok. They don't want to go back to these clunky interfaces. They want it to be simple. I want to get the thing I want to get, and I want to see the thing I want to see in an easy way. I want to move on with my life. I think we've strayed from that, and it all goes back.
I think that we become different people when it comes to the business world. No, so they're like, our expectations as consumers are very high, and then our expectations like using business apps is kind of low.
Yeah, very low. And I think there's two reasons for that. I think one is, what are we going to do about it? Like, there's not like there's better options out there for the most part. Two, we don't make the decisions on that for the most part. You and I are in positions where we are making those decisions. We're picking what software other people are going to be forced to use and update. And it's a burden a bit, because to actually find that is a tremendous amount of time. And I don't know how much time you spend end of periods, quarters, months, years doing vendor evaluations, negotiations, and buy cycles. I'll tell you for myself, it takes about 5 times longer than I wish it would, which is already more time than it should.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna need like a stiff coffee after this day. Like, what's going on the day before the end of the year with with a lot of companies. So anyway, all to say, if my conviction about the go-to-market bloat problem wasn't as strong as it was, I would just pick whatever's cheapest and easiest and move on. I think that we are, as a civilization of tech workers, inundated with poor quality point solutions that really do one or two things well and nothing else. They don't integrate well even with each other across the board. You need to get other software to have them integrate. And you create this nightmare of tech debt. My previous role, I had something like 60 tools in my go-to-market stack. Yeah. 60. It never should be that way. At Copy, my goal is platforms only. I want you to hold me to this, but that's my goal. I don't want point solutions if I can't avoid it. Now, I say that, but if we need something, we'll get it, and eventually there's always an ERP and all these, right? But
yeah, as a goal, I think it's like a good vision. Yes.
Yeah, because that means if you have platforms only, you need fewer employees to manage the tech, which means you can deploy resources to generating revenue faster. That should be the goal. How can we deploy a greater percent of our resources to either generating product to make us better in the market, or to generating a new business? That should be our goal.
I like that, and I think it's a good goal and vision. I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't buy any point solution, but the goal of like simplifying and reduce bloat is a very important one. Like it's like a North Star that you need to drive towards it. In general, I'm very excited about this space because there is so much to do and so much to solve for. I think it's also, like one of the reasons why, in many ways, technology has failed us is because go-to-market is a very interesting space where there is data, there is technology, there is apps, there is tools, but there is people. I mean, these are people talking to other people, trying to convince them of, what they are saying, and they're trying to understand problems and find solutions. So it's a very human and tech problem. So it's different than software developers. Software developers, I think, have a different mindset, a different mentality. They try to solve things in their comfort zone. Well, go-to-market people are exposed to a million inputs, and the interaction with other people is very important. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, and I think you're bringing up a very salient point for a couple of reasons, and one of them is super timely. I'm not sure if you've noticed, I have these dings and dongs coming out of this computer. I have set up do not disturb on every single system I have here, and yet it still goes through. Why? Because it's not human-centric. It's not meant for people. It's meant for process. And I find all of this wildly annoying. This is where we are as professionals today. We aren't thinking about how the people need to do their job and go back to their families. We think a lot more about how does this what's easier to build this process around.
Very good. And so thinking about that, thinking about the future, so one idea is to simplify, reduce bloat, have that North Star that we talked about reducing and thinking more about organically about the problems that we want to solve. What is the future you think in go-to-market ops? Is it all about AI? Is that the key technology that we're all going to use, or is it something else combined with AI?
I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to bring. I have no idea. I've read something about this the other day as well. I don't know what AI is going to look like a year from now. Do we hit AGI? Do we, the magic three letters, right? Or not? And I don't know. So the way I like to think about it is a little bit different. I like to think a lot about what are the capabilities that a good, intentional go-to-market operations function enables for a business. And if I think about that, I think the answer is efficiency, scale, and speed to revenue. And how you achieve that, it matters. It obviously matters, but it doesn't matter as much as what you're achieving. And so I can see a world 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where this role doesn't exist. I can see it.
The go-to-market ops. Okay.
Yes, right? As a job, like I can see a world where that title isn't there.
It is one of the fastest job categories in America. Sales
today.
ops, RevOps.
But 10 years ago, it didn't exist, right? Like 10 years ago, we were saying the same thing about CCOs, right? So, and now look at what's happening with customer success ranks. They're shrinking. So I don't want to tie this conversation to a title. I want to tie it to capabilities, because the capabilities are all that matters. And so if I think about what's going to accelerate revenue, well, if we think about an operational component that accelerates revenue, it's how can we budget, scale, and plan faster, better, more accurately. AI is going to help with that, sure. But you know what else will? Seeing development in FP&A works. How FP&A is taking more and more ownership of actually reporting on the business that is planning for the business. Like seeing that a lot. My partner here at Copy is phenomenal in this as well. And it's one of the best relationships I've had in finance my career probably. And so I'm seeing that change. I'm seeing the changing of the COO role as well, and the COO teams. Right? It's very much more about cadences and operationalizing cadences. There was an article by David Sachs I came across yesterday. It talked about this topic as well. You think you need a COO, what you actually need are cadences. And he's right. We talk about revenue cadences that actually matter, whether it's QBRs to a launch cycle in marketing, and how do we start tying these different functions of the business together to push the business forward faster. If we can do that in a more structured way, why do you need large go-to-market operations teams? The largest team I've had in this function was 30 people. Even for a large company, that's a lot of people, a lot of resources. What if you took those resources and deployed them into marketing, or deployed them into sales or customer success, and accelerated your retention? A SaaS business only functions as an annuity. So the longer we have a customer, the more value there is for our business. So let's maybe not spend those resources on planning and processes to do that automatically. Instead, let's focus on making our customers happier. Mic drop.
Interesting perspective. So the role will cancel itself out as it becomes smoother, like scaling and speed to market type of revenue engine. I don't know. My perspective is that there are pockets. So I see the promise of AI around creating more efficiency and productivity everywhere. I feel that in the field, reps are still extremely inefficient, not because of them, but because of the technology. So I feel that flipping a little bit the ratio and investing more in certain processes and tech in order to make the reps more efficient, maybe having less reps than we used to have, but having them more efficient because they are immediately enabled, they have the right tools, they have the right platforms, so that they can just run, talking about speed, which I think is so important, 100%, is my bet. But it's interesting, your perspective, and I know that we are at time and that you have to go, but I feel that we should do a part 2 of this. This was very interesting, and we are touching on very important points. So if you're open, I think we should do a part 2 of this conversation.
I would love to. And just I'll leave you with one thought on what you just said there about the rep efficiency is, I think that I think we lost a lot of time during COVID. We went from an in-office sales culture to a fully remote sales culture. We had a generation of people start and go up to 4 years into their sales career without seeing a colleague. And I think the most impactful thing for a young salesperson is to sit next to someone who's doing better than them and listen to the difference. They have their manager two chairs down overhear something on a call and then say, "Hey, let's role play something. Let's fix this. Like that wasn't good. Here's what we can do." Like that's how you get better at sales. It's an apprenticeship role, really, if you want to go back to it. Like most roles are apprenticeships, I think, and there's a lot more writing about that recently, the value of formal education versus apprenticeships, and I think it's interesting. But sales, I think, is an apprenticeship role, and to a large degree, not completely. And so what happens in this post-COVID world? How do we start fixing rep productivity? I am of the general belief that early career salespeople should be in office, because that's how you fix sales productivity. First, you got to explain what is sales productivity. What does good look like? Set examples for people. I'm not saying I don't like remote work. I like remote work. I'm a fan of remote work. But nothing replaces education early in your career. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Very good. Thank you, Jared. This was great. I think we'll definitely do a part 2, but this as a part 1 works great. And so thank you very much for being our podcast.
Thank you, Rich. I had a wonderful time. Talk to you soon.